Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Credit Chat. I'm Rod Griffin, Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian, and I'm here to answer your questions about credit reports and credit scores and fraud and ID theft, all the things we talk about every week. Dove 4C, thanks for joining, and to talk about where we are with COVID-19 and what's happening here. If you have questions, Indy Elijah, thanks for joining. I'll work on it. I'll try to get it right. Thanks for being here. Ms. ED4, always great to see you join and have you on the chat with us. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. It's a lot that's been going on this week. You can now get a credit report once a week at annualcreditreport.com, for example. So there's no reason not to know what's in your credit reports and be able to get assistance if you need it. Use that report as a financial tool. Use it to identify your creditors you need to work with. It usually includes a phone number that you can call and contact them. So it helps you contact your lenders. There may be some that you've forgotten about. If you have a card in a drawer, for example, I talk to people surprisingly often who say they got their report for the first time in several years and realized that they have an account that's open, that's active, and that's they had forgotten about, and just because they'd put it in a drawer in a safe somewhere and had forgotten that they even had it. So, make sure that you're working with your lenders. Make sure that you are reaching out to them and getting help. There are things they can do now to help make sure we get through this time of crisis as whole as we can, and it's affecting all of us. So we try to be here, and I say we, myself, my team, my counterparts and colleagues at Experian are online and live every day of the week. I think just about, maybe Mondays, we may not have a live program yet, but we'll work on that. But want to be here to answer your questions and help you get the information you need to be financially successful, to help get through this, to share with you what we're doing. So if you have questions, please ask, because I know if you have a question, others do too, and that's the whole idea as we share. Stacy Sherrill, why is it that Equifax TransUnion report a much slower rate? Do you mean like a lower credit score? Not sure what you mean by that. It could be just Experian seems to be on time. Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's the first thing I'd say. We want to be. I'm not sure, in terms of what's updated. It takes some time to update information. First thing I would say, and I think people, one of the questions I get is, I just talked to my lender. I got, an account put in forbearance or in deferment, or I had something changed. When will it show up in my credit report? Now, so as far as balances, and this kind of goes to the same thing. Or when does my account get updated? Accounts at all three are typically updated at Experian, TransUnion, Equifax roughly every 30 days, sometimes a little bit longer, maybe 45 days. But they're not always updated at the same time. Our systems are different. Experian actually has the most modern version of a credit report, if you will, a database, and the way we operate. We have a relational database. And the way we collect information, we think helps us update information more quickly and more accurately, to maintain it, to make it safer and more secure, all of those things. So it may just be that the timing of when your lender reports to Experian as opposed to the other two credit bureaus, it may cause a delay in them being updated. So it could be any number of things, but I'm glad we're there and making sure it's updated. Your balance will show what's on your billing statement as well. It won't always match what's in your account. If you were to check your account right now and then looked at your credit report, those numbers probably wouldn't match because you made charges, you maybe paid some things off, and so the current balance in your account statement could be different than the account balance showing on your credit report, because your credit report represents a full billing cycle. So a 30-day period, we get that update when we get your billing statement information reported to us. And so that would be potentially different. So don't try to compare numbers day to day. It's not real time either at this point. Someday maybe, but not yet. And I'm sorry if I went back. I didn't scroll fast enough. Can student loans be removed from your credit report? Queen Saxton. Eventually, if you pay them off, we're going to keep those paid student loans for 10 years from the pay date, which means you'll have that positive information there to work for you. That's going to be a good thing. If you've fallen behind, become delinquent, the accounts are recorded as a loss. Eventually, they'll fall off as well. But you can't remove them if they're in repayment or outside of the timeframes that are specified in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So they're going to stay for 7 years from the original delinquency date if the accounts become late. If it's paid in full, it's going to stay for 10 years from the date that it's reported as paid. So that's kind of how that will work. So it won't come off right away. Why is it? Okay, got that one. So I'm catching up. Will the disaster impact remark on the credit report affect my credit score? I am Coach Patrice. There are three things that we offered, we the national credit reporting companies, and did early in the process. So we make available to lenders the ability to report an account in forbearance, in deferment, how am I trying to say this? An account in deferment or forbearance and affected by natural disaster or declared disaster. So with a special code, for lack of a better term, that they report to us, so that they will not affect credit scores. So your accounts would show current if they were current at the time of the forbearance becoming active. If you were late, so you got a 30-day late payment at the time the forbearance were put in place or the deferment were put in place, the account would continue to show 30 days late, but would not become any more delinquent. So it kind of locks things in at that point with that forbearance or deferment code, so that your credit histories and scores are protected. At that point, we also have a statement that says you are affected by a natural disaster or declared disaster that your lenders can report as well. And Vantage Score will see that account and treat any account with that statement as neutral, meaning it won't be positive or negative. Other scores may not, so they don't all recognize this statement. But if an account's in forbearance or it's deferred, it will be reported to us kind of static, if you will. So it won't become any more negative, or it will continue to be reported current. And there are requirements in the CARES Act and that help protect you as well and make sure that things continue to be reported as current, and require that lenders do so if a person's affected by COVID-19. So several things in place. Bottom line is, if your accounts are in forbearance or deferment reported, you shouldn't see them become more negative. If you've had a late payment, if there's no late payment, they wouldn't become delinquent. So that's kind of how that works. How long do you think these credit card companies will work with you? They're going to want money sometime. And I think you're right. At some point, we're going to have to get back to work. I think everybody's saying that. The governors are saying that. The president's saying that. Congress is saying that. The business people are saying that as well. And the people, the person who cuts my hair really needs to get back to work. I know he wants to, and his shop, they all want to be back at work, and I need them to be back at work. So, so that we can continue to make those payments. But I think we're in such a unique place right now that we don't know, and we just have to continue to do the best we can. And I think lenders are going to continue to work with people. It's important that we maintain accurate information in your credit histories and credit reports, so that when we come out of this, they'll be there to help you get the credit you need. And that lenders will be able to continue to know that you're a good credit risk and be able to make those loans and open accounts for you. So we have to continue to do the work we do as well, and continue to work with each other. And I think it's just, we have to continue to work together. It's very unique in the situation we're in. Stacy Cheryl, makes your scores different. So going back to the balances that are reported, it would affect potentially your utilization rate, but it may not be that's affecting your scores from one credit reporting system to the other. There are several other things that come into play with credit scores in addition to that information. So, for example, at Experian, our databases, the way that our credit reporting system works, is different than TransUnion or Equifax. So if you think of a PC versus a Mac, we're kind of, I don't know whichever one you prefer, that's the one we are. So we're either a PC or a Mac. Our competitors have a different kind of operating system, and so scoring companies like FICO and Vantage Score, I'll come back to Vantage Score, they're a bit unique, but FICO, for example, their scoring models are potentially a little bit different from one to the other just to operate within that particular system. So kind of like if you have software like Microsoft Word can look a little bit different on a Mac than it does on a PC. That can affect the scores a little bit. So that really does have an impact. So that's something to be aware of. That could be what's causing a difference. Usually not much. And so look at that. It could be just the nature of making sure that the way their scores are programmed to work within that operating system create a slight difference in scores. There could be that there's other information that's different from one report to the other. It could be other accounts aren't updated as recently as they are at Experian. It could be that there are accounts that are not in their reports that are in ours. Usually that doesn't happen. It would be like a small local lender, a small regional lender of some sort potentially could report to one or two, but not all three. That's unusual today, but possible. So look at all of that information. It could be any of those things or a combination of those things, without looking at the report. So it could be that they just haven't updated, could be a different score. So another thing to think about, when you get a score from Experian, you typically get a FICO 8 score. You might get a Vantage Score 3.0 or maybe 4.0 now, but typically it's a FICO 8 score. So look at the score you get. If you go to TransUnion or Equifax and get scores, you might not get a FICO score. It might be a Vantage score. It could be a different version of the FICO score, so that could introduce some difference in the number. So it's hard to compare one number to the other, but what will happen, as far as I've ever seen in the 2 decades I've been doing this, if you have a good score on one system, you're going to have good scores in the others as well. I've never seen an instance where a person had a great score with one and a poor score somewhere else. So and be confident in that. The Vantage score was developed in partnership with 3 national credit reporting companies, and its algorithm is designed to account for those differences in the way that their computer systems work. So the differences in the way our databases operate. If the information is the same across the bureaus, your scores should be exactly the same as well. So if you see a difference in Vantage score, it's because there's some difference in information. With FICO, sometimes it's just the operating system will create a few point difference too. So things to be aware of. So Equifax isn't always the lowest. Yeah, and you may find that, again, depending on the scoring system. I can tell you that my scores at Experian are higher than my scores at TU and Equifax. So they're not the same. I don't worry about that too much. They're close to the same, so I don't worry too much about that. How long should you keep a card open after paying it off? And the answer is it depends. It depends on what you're planning to do. So, Shep Daddy, and that's the answer to every credit reporting question is it depends. So if you are planning to apply for credit in the next, say, 3 to 6 months, probably best to leave it open, because when you close the account, you lose the available credit limit for that account, which will affect your utilization rate, cause it to go up, and your scores will go down. That always happens. So usually not very much, but you don't want to make that change if you're planning to apply for credit. Better to leave it open. On the other hand, if you're not planning to apply for credit, don't need to have that card in the future, say for the next 6 months or so. If you close it, yes, your scores will come down a bit because you have closed that account, but usually within a few months, your scores rebound. They come back up. So because it's clear you didn't take on new debt, you just closed an account, and that way you don't have to worry about it affecting a future credit decision. So look at your overall situation and make that decision based on what you're going to do with that card. It might make sense to keep it open. I've done that with, I've had creditors call, say, you haven't used our card, we're going to close it if you don't use it. And I've had somewhere I went, it's okay, and let them close. And others I went, I have some things I want to do maybe in the coming months, so I'll go make a charge so it stays open and then pay it off so it's still there. So it just depends on what we're doing, what you're doing, and where you are. Queen, you're welcome. I'm not sure what I said. I hope it was something helpful. Big Michael 10, thanks for joining. Stacy Cheryl, I paid several of your credit cards down to 0. Is it bad that I don't want to use them? No, and it kind of goes back to what I was just talking about. It's credit scores and credit reports are not about how many cards you have. It's really about how you use the credit you have available. So if you have accounts and you don't want them, That's up to you. And really, if you're not using them, lenders don't really want you to have them either. Well, that's not quite right. They don't, they would rather you close them because it costs them money to maintain that account. They have to comply with all of the accounting rules and regulations, report them, and not only the credit bureaus, but all of the accounting reporting they have to do, reaching out, communicating with you, and making sure you get your billing statements and things updated. So there's cost associated with that account. So they want you to be a good customer. They want you to make charges. They want you to pay on time and in full. But if you're not using an account, it may be better that for both that you not have it. So look at what you do with them, whether you need the account, if there are other options you have. If you have other accounts already in place, that work for you and you don't need those, it may be beneficial to close ones you don't have. So not necessarily bad. You might, on the other hand, want to make a charge periodically, keep them open so that they're there to work for you if you need them at some point in the future. Chef Daddy, is the Boost commercial real deal from your company? It absolutely is. I'm not sure I feel about the purple cows at this point, but still working on that. My shirt's more blue than purple. Kind of looks purple in my screen. So kind of fitting. But and there's a purple square right there. So that's our purple color. But yes, Experian Boost is a free service that we provide. If you go to Experian.com/boost, you can enroll and give us permission. So it's permission based to access the bank account you pay your utility bills or cell phone bills through. And you can tell us which bills you want us to capture the payments, and we will include them in your credit report as positive payment information to help boost your credit scores. And it's permission based. And if you change your mind, you can tell us to stop, and we would. But really simple. And what we're seeing is that for 2 out of 3 people, they see an increase in their credit scores. On average, about 13 points. If a person has a thin file, say fewer than 5 accounts in their credit history, or scores below 680, and we use a FICO 8 score, we're seeing the most benefit. And on average, a person with a thin file is seeing about a 19-point increase. So it does help, does work, and it just adds your positive cell phone payments, your positive utility payments to your credit report, which didn't happen in the past. They didn't report on-time payments, but would potentially report missed payments or collection accounts, that sort of thing. So it gives you a way to show that you do manage those accounts well. They're very credit-like. We've done years of research to verify that paying them on time shows evidence of being a good credit risk, and it doesn't skew scores. So it wouldn't say if a person was managing their credit poorly just because were irresponsible and overcharged, or didn't manage them well, you wouldn't see their scores jump up a lot. But if it's a person who has a short history doing the right things, paying them on time, just doesn't have enough history to show that they're a good risk yet, haven't had access to traditional accounts, can help boost those scores. Person's rebuilding and the history shows that they're moving in the right direction, it can help. So we think, and our hearing, it's been a really powerful tool. Should I continue to keep activity on them? Yeah. So Stacy, Cheryl, if you have an account, you need to have activity on that account. The other thing about credit scores is that they not only look at whether there's an account in your history, but to include it in the calculation, they need to see activity in that account. Doesn't mean you have to carry a balance. If you make a charge each month, small charge, $10, $15, $20, turn around, pay it full each month, you'll have that activity. Scores require generally 3 to 6 months of continuous activity in an account in order to include it in the score calculation. So you could have an account in your report. If there's no activity over 6 months or a year, you might find that it's there, but it's not helping your credit scores at all. So yes, you do need some activity and consistent activity for it to be included in scores, or it could just be in the report and not be helping you. So absolutely, yes. It's not bad. I say use them, pay the entire balance off at the end of the month. And Ms. ED4, we agree on that. And you've heard me say that too. You don't have to carry a balance. That's another myth that goes around, that you should only, I've heard this myth, and I stress myth, I won't say, and it's not true. So I've heard it said and seen it on the internet. So you can't believe everything you see on the internet. But I've heard it said that you should only pay 95% of your balance or it will hurt your credit scores. Not true. You can pay the balance in full and not carry a balance You do not have to carry a balance to help your credit scores. If you only pay 95% of the balance, it means you get to pay interest on the remaining balance, but it doesn't do anything to help your credit score. So you can pay the balance in full. Again, your balance is usually what shows on your billing statement. So even if you pay it in full, you'll probably still show a balance in your credit report. So you don't have to carry balance from one month to the next. What happens when a person is deceased and they have a credit card balance? M. Knowles, if a person passes away, a couple of things. So if we're thinking about an individual, if the account has no joint account holders, no co-signers, then the account would become the responsibility of the estate, and typically it would be paid out of the estate funds. So that's how that would happen. If a person is a joint account holder with a person who's deceased, the joint account holder remains responsible for that debt and would then have to make those payments. So if it's an individual with an account, if it's an account with no joint holders and a person passes away, then that account would have to be paid through the proceeds from the estate of that individual. If it's a joint account, then the joint account holder becomes responsible for those debts under the terms of that contract. So important to know. Another reason, before you add someone to your account as a joint account holder or as a as a co-signer, understand the responsibilities that come with that. Person passing away is a whole different issue, but it's worth noting there are consequences potentially of things you wouldn't expect as well. So be aware of those kinds of issues. If you're going to co-sign, just be aware that you may need to. Believe me, I want to go back to work bad. I know. I just don't think Vegas is coming back to normal. Beef fried rice, not for a while. I mean, it's scary times right now. So and I understand, and it's not, this isn't a political forum, so we won't go into politics. But there are things that are, we need to get back to work, but we need to do it safely, and that's the balance. It's going to be hard to strike. I have a pretty good score in Experian, TransUnion. Equifax is always lower. Yeah, it seems to go that way. There's usually one bureau that, for whatever reason, will have higher scores. One that'll fall in the middle and one that'll be lower and be kind of consistent that way, whether it's because of who's reporting or how they're reporting or when things get updated, any number of things. Usually, though, those scores are pretty close. And I think when I see my scores, they're 10, 20, 30 points. Some people think 30 points sounds like a lot. It's really not that much in terms of scores, depending on the scoring system that's used, and the differences. And it also is dependent on what your scores are. And if you have really strong scores, a 30-point difference might not mean much in terms of being able to qualify for credit. If, on the other hand, your scores are less high, if they're lower, it could make a difference. So of course that's it's all relative. It's always it depends situation. So but typically you don't see a huge range, especially if it's the same score. Now I've had scores, and just so you're aware, I purchase scores periodically from multiple sources. The things you can get online through our monitoring service, through the other bureaus. And I've seen score ranges of 150 points from high to low, but they're different scores with different scales. So you always keep that in mind too, especially if you see a huge difference in your scores or a big difference. So look at the scoring system, look at the scale that goes with it, and that will tell you a lot. You don't panic when you see a big difference between two scores if you get two different scores, because they could just be different scores with different scales. For example, FICO, what we call generic scores that are used for multiple kinds of different kinds of lending. They have a scale that goes from 300 to 850 or so. If you're buying a car, the FICO score for auto lending actually goes to 900. So you could have a score above 850. And so that can introduce quite a difference. So if you're looking at an auto score and comparing it to a generic score, you might see a big difference in those scores. But it's just because the scale is 50 points higher than the other score. So keep those things in mind. Make sure you're looking at all of the details around what you're looking at, so you understand what it says, and ask those questions. What score is it you use? What's the scale? What does this mean in terms of risk for you as the lender? And that will give you a much better sense of what you're looking at. Will Investel 7, why do you have to have access to our bank account for that? That's too much information to be given. Great question. And the reason is that the utility companies, the cell phone companies, don't report that information to us. And so with your permission, we access your account to capture that payment once a month. So we're not looking at the whole bank account. But that's why we instituted. It's the only way we can actually capture that positive information. So it's done with your permission and knowing exactly what accounts that you're letting us look at, and you tell us which payments you want us to capture to put you in control of that. It's also always secured and encrypted. Experian doesn't access your report directly. We work with a third-party company that goes to your account. So it separates us a step. And again, it's with your permission. If you're not comfortable, it's certainly not something we would, that you should do, and make sure you're comfortable with that. If you are, and you understand, the security, and you are comfortable with it, great. And it's a service that's there, that's available. And that's why we make it permission based, is we give you the control to make that decision. But it's the only way we can actually capture that information right now to help consumers add that information. So it's the first time it's ever been done in our industry. And when I say the first time we've ever in our industry given you as an individual the ability, the authority, the power to tell us to do something and to say, don't want you to anymore either. So we've given you control. So really different and new for us too. So understand and you make sure you're comfortable. If you're not comfortable, don't do it. I think that's perfectly, reasonable, and we should understand that as well. But we do everything we can to make sure that information is secure, it's safe, that you know exactly what's being accessed, and that you're comfortable with the security as well, and that you have control of it. So that's the best answer I can give. Agency called the number, asked me to pay the remainder. I missed part of the question. Jacob Taylor, let me see if I can find the rest of your question there. I missed something. And I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I missed it, Jacob. If you could repost the remainder, I missed something in there. The first part. It called to ask me to pay for the remainder. I'm not sure what that piece is. Chicken Boo 22. How long do hard inquiries impact your score? Hard inquiries, just for everybody else. First, let me tell everybody, if you're just joining who I am. I'm Rod Griffin. I'm Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. This is Credit Chat Live. I'm here 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, Tuesdays and Thursdays to answer your questions, do exactly what we're doing now, and so that you have the information you need to manage your credit history better, take care of those credit scores, and use your credit report as a financial tool. That's what this is all about. So Chicken Boo 22. For those who don't know about inquiries, just some background. There are two kinds of inquiries in a credit report. The first are what we call soft inquiries. Those are inquiries that are shown only to you on your personal credit report when you get it. They're things like getting your own credit report, reviews by your existing lender, pre-approved credit offers, insurance inquiries, employment inquiries, things that aren't applications for credit. Hard inquiries are inquiries that are shown to other lenders because they are the result of you applying for credit or other services, and they represent potential new debt that doesn't show as an account yet in your credit report. So they indicate some risk. It's minimal. Inquiries actually have less impact than anything else. They're the least important factor in credit scores, but they do have a potential impact. So that's what hard inquiries are. Hard inquiries remain in your report for 2 years from the date of the inquiry, as do soft inquiries. So 2 years is the time frame specified in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. However, they don't affect scores that entire time. In fact, inquiries really only affect scores for 2 to 3 months. And by that time, there's either a new account, and that's the risk indicator, or there is no new account, which means that the inquiry doesn't represent risk. So just usually 2 or 3 months. It will always be the least important factor in your credit scores. In the industry, we call it the fifth factor, because when you get a credit report and you get your credit scores, when a credit score is calculated, a series of risk factors are generated that tell you what from your report most affected it. when you get a credit score, you'll get those risk factors, usually 4, sometimes 5. If there's a fifth, it will be inquiries, and that's because they're the least important. They're listed in order of importance. So people worry a lot about inquiries, and I don't worry about them at all because we're usually not out applying for a lot of credit. And don't very often for the vast majority of us. If you're buying a car or a house, they will shotgun your credit report, send it to lots of different lenders. That's okay because when you're applying for a car loan or a mortgage loan, the credit scoring systems recognize that and will only count those inquiries as one inquiry or not count them at all with the newest scores, so you don't have to worry about that. So 2 or 3 months and very minimal to begin with. If an inquiry causes you to be declined or not get the best rates, it's because there's something else in your report that's more important that's already making you a marginal credit risk to that lender. So you look at what the other things that are listed with the risk factors, because that's going to be what you need to focus on first. The inquiries aren't going to make that much difference. And you can't, unless they're fraudulent, we can't take them off. So if they're fraudulent, we can remove them. Otherwise, they're simply a factual record that your report's been accessed. So all about inquiries. Will and Vessel 7, does that apply to an authorized user as well? Now I'm trying to remember your question. In terms of Experian, wait a minute, Boost, no. Experian Boost is the individual, so it wouldn't report for that authorized user, and generally authorized users wouldn't apply to utility service or cell phone service, and that's what Experian Boost is the ability to report cell phone or utility information, not other credit information. So it wouldn't work that way for an authorized user. I'm making sure I didn't miss another question. I'm answering the right question for you. BTC Salon, I'd like to know if applying for the EIDL caused a hard pull on your credit report. So if you're applying for a EIDL, if you're thinking about the coronavirus small business incentives and things, no, it won't. When you're applying for a small business loan, it will be a business credit issue and it won't affect your credit history. And so it shouldn't affect it. If I'm understanding the acronym or initials properly. Sorry if I'm not. And if not, clarify and I'll do my best to answer. I was hoping to have a collection removed from your score. I wanted to have settled for less than collection removed from my score. So if you negotiate debt settlement, the account will be reported as settled for less than originally agreed, and that's negative. So it's not going to be positive. If you don't pay an account in full as required under contract, the status that's reported will be settled, and that's considered negative by lenders. So I'm not saying that debt settlement isn't a good thing in some cases, but it's one of those things that should be a last resort. If there's a way to work with your lender to pay and have the balance paid in full because you paid it off as agreed, maybe extending the time frame. Lenders offer different things, especially these days. And what we're in right now, talk to your lender, see if they might be able to help. Collection agencies as well may be able to assist. And so talk with them and see what they can do there. But we reported as settled or settled for less than originally agreed, rather than paid in full. How do you get details on dark web? Notice Experian will not respond. So our monitoring services have the skills and expertise and tools to monitor the dark web for use of your identifying information to make sure and to notify you if we find anything. I'm not an expert in that arena by any scope. I could tell you how to get on the dark web, but I'm glad I don't know how. It's usually a place you don't want to be because that's where the bad things happen generally. And that's why we monitor. We have some brilliant people that work for us. Sometimes the term's called white hats that are able to monitor and know how to do that. And it's not individuals, it's an automated process, but they are able to create the programming and things to monitor to do that. So, so that's why we do it is if your name has been stolen, your identity has been stolen, it appears in the dark web, we can alert you to that. And we will notify you if you are enrolled in our monitoring service that we found information on the dark web. That would be one of the notices you would get. When finding EIDL through the SBA, yeah, they pull your credit. Yeah, so it depends. So it depends on how they pull the report and what the relationship is. And I honestly, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But so I'm not sure. I'll find out, and I'll come back on Tuesday, and I'll have an answer. Remind me, and we'll get an answer for you just to be sure. But I want to say it's soft, but I may be wrong. So don't take my word for it, but I will find out and remind me, and we'll get the answer for you. So you stumped me today. How long does it take to build up to get a score between 720 and 850? If we start today, layback Dre, it depends. So I know it's an old answer, and I say it all the time, but it's true. It depends on where you are, how long you have credit history. So if you have zero credit history right now, and you start today, you open an account. First thing to know is that you need to have an account reported in your name in order to have a credit history. That typically takes about 30 days from the date you apply with the lender and they approve your application. So they'll set up the loan in their systems, but they typically don't report it to Experian until the end of the first billing cycle when you make that first payment. So now they have something to report, and that's when you get a credit history established. From there, you need to have 3 to 6 months of activity with that account before it can be included in most scores. Vantage Score, in some cases, can calculate a score with 1 month of activity. So, you allow 3 to 6 months before you are scoreable. In the meantime, if you have a cell phone bill or utility bills, once that credit history is established, if you use Experian Boost, enroll in Experian Boost, and we include those payments in your credit history, you might see your score increase potentially significantly at that point. So that can help as well. We actually go back up to 24 months with the history when you give us permission to capture that information. So we could have not just 1 month of cell phone payment, we'd have 24. So we have 2 years of history right away. That can help it get you established. From there, it's just time. And it probably will take some time. And then again, it depends on your history, on your history, the accounts you have, where you're actually starting from. But it depends. But 6 months at least to really get established, to get to 720, maybe a bit longer than that. But it depends on so many different factors. But you need to get started. It's kind of the first step. 756 score, 2 cards having trouble paying off. Should I get a consolidation loan at this time? Marcia Hobson. It's hard to say without knowing more about what's going on. If you could take one card and pay it down, it might help. So put minimum payments toward one, pay down the other. Talk to your lenders. They may be able to. My dog, I think there must be sirens somewhere in the neighborhood. My dogs are howling, which cracks me up, but I can't. And they're little bitty dogs. It's hilarious. So I apologize for that. Talk to your lender. A consolidation loan, if they make a loan that pays them both off, that gives you a lower interest rate, perhaps a longer repayment term, and your payment amount is lower, it can help. I would never say that's a bad idea. I did that with my student loans, and so I've been there. But possibly. But if you can pay one down without getting a consolidation loan, pick one and get it paid off, and then do the snowball or avalanche method, whichever way you want to approach. Either way, getting those balances down you're right. That's kind of the key. But look at your overall situation. That's kind of going to be my best advice without knowing more about what other bills you have, debts you have. One thing you could do is visit nfcc.org and find a good credit counselor in your area. They're nonprofit, and they can look at your overall financial situation, which is something I can't do, and give you advice on options you have. They can potentially help work with your lenders, so they could provide more insight. And not a bad thing to do, because they provide objective perspectives and expertise and non-judgmental. They're nonprofit, and there are other good ones out there as well. But get advice from somebody who can look at you, look at your situation. Always, people will say, talk to your family. I love my family. I do not take financial advice from them, and I don't share all of my financial life with them. But if I'm talking to someone who's objective and separate, I have a financial advisor. I have, work with professionals that can help with that because they're objective and they have a responsibility to help you make good decisions. So, and they will know what they're talking about. So, all important. Is authorized user liable on a credit card for deceased? No. As an authorized user, you have permission to use the account, but you are not liable for any debts on that account. So, no, you're not. The shelf life of a vehicle makes sense. To a degree, I don't know how old the car is, but it likely is referring to the ability to sell it again. So how long can that car be retained and then sold and recover any debt associated with it would be my guess on that situation. Should I pay the remainder of the balance to have it removed? Back to settled question. Yeah. My position is this. If you pay the account in full, it should be reported as paid in full because it's an accurate history of that account. If you settle, it should be reported as settled because that's the accurate history of the account. So that's my perspective on that. Paying in full is always better than not. And the other thing to know is that with collection accounts, if you pay a bill off, the newest scores from Vantage Score and FICO, so FICO 8, 9, Vantage Score 3.0, 4.0, once that collection is paid and reported as paid on your credit report, those scores ignore that account, essentially. They don't include them in the score calculation, so paying a collection can immediately help improve your score. So it pays to pay it off if you can. And right away, the next time a score is calculated after it's updated would benefit your scores. So my perspective on that. Contractor will not stop reporting with no details. I'm not sure, what the question there is, but and so I can't speak to that specific situation or individual situation. Mortgage help score 624. Is that good? 624 is not really. The average score is about 682, I think. So. Need to do some work, but actually at FICO, the average FICO score is a little over 700. Average Vantage score is about 682. So a little bit of work to do. Get your credit report, get your credit. You have your credit scores. Look at those factors. They'll tell you exactly what to work on. Sometimes time is the issue too. So if you're young, just starting out, haven't had credit before, it might just be a time issue. So look at those risk factors. Ms. DeDevour, thank you so much. I think it's so important that we talk to each other, share information, and help each other know what they need to know. So thank you so much. And one more question, CCBC 100, great question to end on today. Why is Vantage Score and FICO such different scores? And the answer is because they're different scores. So it's a little bit like looking at or comparing a Ford and a Chevrolet. They're both credit scores, but they're very different in terms of the companies that produce them. So Vantage Score has their own algorithms, their own scoring systems, and so their scores look different than a FICO score because they have their own system for evaluating credit histories and determining risk, and they weigh information differently. The things that they look at are in the report are all the same. They get the same information, but the way they weight that information and evaluate it is a little different. Their scales can be different, so that can make a difference. Both of them now are about 300 to 850. I say about maybe 350 to 850, depending. But they typically go to 850 on most of their scores. But again, FICO, for example, has an auto score that goes to 900. So make sure you're looking at scales the same. But even then, what I'm finding now is that they're closer than they used to be. Vantage scores, the older Vantage scores, the original ones went to 990. So you could see a huge difference in the numbers. Today, you don't see quite as much, but they can be a bit different. And that's okay. It's just because they're different scores. Like I said, if you look at a Ford and a Chevrolet, they both make cars. They just do it differently. So different body styles, different features, different kinds of engines, that sort of thing. Kind of the same, loose analogy to Vantage Score and FICO. They're competitors, just like General Motors and Ford, but in the credit scoring world. So they do the same thing. They just do it a little differently, and that can result in the numbers being a bit different. So if you're looking at a Vantage Score, look at that Vantage score from the perspective of the scale for the Vantage score and what that number means in terms of risk within Vantage score. Don't try to compare it to a FICO score. Get a FICO score, look at the scale it's from, look at what that number means in terms of risk for that score. What you will find is the numbers will probably be different, but what they mean in terms of credit risk will be the same. And that's what's important to understand. So take the numbers for what they're worth. They're good to know if you're planning to apply for credit. But more importantly, understand what they mean in terms of risk. And in my experience, if you have a good score from one, it says you're an excellent risk, score from the other will mean you're an excellent risk too, even though the number's different. So don't try to compare the two together exactly, because they won't match exactly, but in terms of the number itself, but in terms of what they mean will almost always be exactly the same. You'll either be a great risk in both of them, or you will be a poor risk in both of them, or somewhere in between. So don't compare the numbers, compare what they mean in terms of risk. I think it's the most important thing. So thank you all so much for a fantastic conversation today. And if I hope I didn't miss your question. If I did, let me know. We need to get back on that SBA question, so we'll make sure we do that. But thank you so much. I'm Rod Griffin. I'm Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. This is Credit Chat Live. I'm here 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, Tuesdays and Thursdays to answer your questions. We'll be on Facebook Live and on crowdcast.io tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, 12:30 Eastern, to talk about all of the things that we're seeing. So myself and Christina Roman and Jennifer White are going to be on my team, and we'll be talking about what really goes into a credit report. Because we introduced a free weekly report this week, that'd be good to talk about what to look for, what you should expect to see, and answer your questions. So hope to see you on Facebook Live tomorrow or on Crowdcast. And you can learn more about our Credit Chat Live programs at ex.pn/CreditChatLive. On Wednesdays, we're on Twitter at 2 o'clock Central, 3 Eastern. Have great conversations now in a series around COVID-19, as well as talking about personal finance and other issues. You can learn more about that at ex.pn/CreditChat. Thank you all so much for being here, for all of the fantastic questions. Please be safe, please stay well, and I'll talk to you all very soon.